Okay everyone, I'm just going to quickly or hopefully quickly answer a question that was related to my lecture on the pancreas, where I talked about the hydrogen ions coming from the pancreas neutralizing the alkaline tide of the stomach, which sort of sounds a bit counterintuitive when you think about the fact that the pancreas is secreting bicarbonate ions and the stomach is secreting acid and so on. So I'm going to talk about what we call neutralization of the alkaline tide from the stomach with the acid tide from the pancreas. All right, so let's quickly go through this. So the stomach releases bicarbonate ions into the blood, okay, during the process of producing hydrogen ions. So the hydrogen ions are produced in the stomach. They go into the lumen of the stomach to do all the digestive stuff. But in producing those hydrogen ions, you also produce bicarbonate ions, which you've got to get rid of. Let's now look at the cell here in the stomach. This is the parietal cell. Now what the parietal cell does is it produces hydrogen ions, and these hydrogen ions are pumped out of the parietal cell, follow the arrow, into the lumen of the stomach to produce the HCl, which is important for digestion. So where do these hydrogen ions come from? Well, if you can have a look, we've got water, we've got carbon dioxide. These come into the cell. They go through the usual carbonic anhydrase reaction, and what do we produce? We produce hydrogen ions and we produce bicarbonate ions. The hydrogen ions, we already know what happens to them. They get pumped into the stomach. Beautiful, let's digest some of those proteins and so on. Now when food's in the stomach, this is all going to be stimulated, this whole process. So you're going to be pumping out a whole heap of hydrogen ions into the lumen of the stomach, which means you're going to be producing a whole heap of bicarbonate ions. You have to do something with them. The parietal cell can't keep these bicarbonate ions. So if we put a red circle around it, what do we do with these bicarbonate ions? Well, we simply exchange them for chloride ions. So chloride ions come in, bicarbonate ions go out into the interstitial space, and of course from the interstitial space, where do they go? They go into the blood. So what we basically are doing is that during the gastric phase of acid secretion, as it's called, gastric because food's in the stomach, we're producing a lot of acid, a lot of hydrogen ions. As part of that process, we're producing a lot of bicarbonate ions. Those bicarbonate ions are then going into the interstitial space, and then from there they go into the blood. So we're making the blood around the stomach alkaline with all these bicarbonate ions. What about the pancreas? Well, the pancreas, we know, produces bicarbonate ions, and in the process of doing that, what it does is it releases hydrogen ions into the blood. Now this is sort of a back to front thing of what we've just seen in the stomach. So I'll bring up this diagram that you all should be very familiar with, this wonderful diagram from Boron and Bol-Pop. And if you have a look, let's see what happens here. Carbon dioxide, water gets taken into the pancreatic ductal cell. Good old carbonic anhydrase produces bicarbonate ions, which then exit into the ductal cell, thus increasing bicarbonate ions in the ductal cell. That's what we want the pancreas to do. Now, of course, this is going to be stimulated when we secrete secretin. And when do we secrete secretin? Well, we secrete secretin when there's food in the intestine. That's called the intestinal phase. So during the intestinal phase, what will happen is we're producing a lot of bicarbonate ions, which means what are we also going to produce a lot of? Hydrogen ions, and here they are here. See, we've got these hydrogen ions that have been produced. So therefore, during this intestinal phase, what happens is that the pancreas is producing massive amounts of hydrogen ions as a byproduct of their bicarbonate ion production. Again, the ductal cell does not want to keep these hydrogen ions inside. We've got to get rid of them. So how do we do it? Well, there's two ways. We have a sodium hydrogen exchanger and a hydrogen pump. Both of these is going to lead to hydrogen ions entering the interstitial space, and when the hydrogen ions enter the interstitial space, where are they going to go? They're going to go into the blood. So they are now going to acidify the blood. All right, so let's just quickly summarize with a simple diagram. In the gastric cells, cells of the stomach, the parietal cells in particular, or specifically, hydrogen ions are produced during the gastric phase. And in the production of these hydrogen ions, what then happens is that the bicarbonate ions are then released into the blood, this byproduct of the hydrogen ion secretion. So during the gastric phase of acid secretion especially, there's a lot of bicarbonate ions entering the blood. This is called the alkaline tide. During the intestinal phase, when food starts leaving the stomach and entering the duodenum, we get the secretion of secretin. This then increases bicarbonate ion secretion into the ducts of the pancreas, but a byproduct of this bicarbonate production are the hydrogen ions. So these hydrogen ions have to get taken out of the ductal cells. They get taken out, and where do they go? Eventually into the blood. So really what you're producing during this intestinal phase is an acid effect. So you've got the acid effect here. All right, good. So the alkaline tide during gastric times, and then the acid tide, that was the word I was looking for, the acid tide during the intestinal phase. All right, well, that's all cool, but we need to really think about a little bit of anatomy, and you know what expert I am in anatomy, so let's look at this diagram. So here we have the stomach, and well, look, here's the pancreas. So you can see these two are both very close together. So therefore, there's going to be a mixing of the blood and so on in this area. So gastric phase, what happens? Here's our pH of the blood, so-called, in this area. So during the gastric phase, the stomach is producing acid to go into the lumen, which then leads to bicarbonate ions leaving these parietal cells and entering the blood. And what effect is this going to have? Well, it's going to increase the pH. Remember, increasing the pH, more alkaline. So this is the alkaline tide. Cool, so that's going to happen, that makes sense. And then, of course, once this chyme goes through the pyloric sphincter and enters the duodenum, it's going to stimulate the secretion of secretin. Now, we're producing all these bicarbonate ions in these ductal cells. The byproduct is hydrogen ions. What do? Well, the hydrogen ions leave the ductal cells, not into the duct, but into the interstitial space and eventually into the blood. So we now have acid entering the blood. What will this do to the pH? Oh, look, it comes back to normal. All right, so this is what happens, or what is believed to happen, and I should make an important note here is that this is a basic theory on what's going on. We do know that there is going to be bicarbonate release into the blood. We do know that there is going to be hydrogen ion released into the blood during the various phases. Does it totally balance out? Well, probably not, or so on, and there's still a bit of argument exactly how important this is. But when you hear alkaline tide, you know that's coming from the stomach. When you hear neutralizing of the alkaline tide via the hydrogen ions from the pancreas, this is where they're coming from. All right. I hope you're all taking care of yourself and are fit and healthy, and I hope this has helped you out understanding what's going on. Thank you.